This report is a maybe I don't know year old or so, but 2 years old, let's say. Drought in Numbers 2022 from uh, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. This came out of COP 15 from Côte d'Ivoire in I'm trying my French in West Africa, in the basically in the Gulf of Guinea. Is it? Yeah. I'm losing my mind. I'm getting old. So this has some nice numbers, risks. Also has a lot of messages about droughts, restoration, building resilience, and being ready. We just saw in the previous podcast how the global transition to flash droughts is happening. So in this is a nice follow up, or maybe this should have gone first, but it doesn't matter. Drought at a glance. Scientific consensus is that there is strong evidence about human induced climate change and how it has led to an increased risk of drought. So there are some references here. Human activities, oops, did I read it correctly? Yeah, I broke at the wrong point. There is strong evidence that human induced climate change has led to an increased risk of drought. Human activities, there is an increase in average surface temperatures around the world. So it's just written in a funny way. uh, Drought is deadly. So this is the scientific consensus, and we know the drought is deadly, and you can find the numbers. From 1970 to 2019, drought was one of the hazards that led to the largest human losses, with a total of approximately 650,000 deaths. Among all the climate-related deaths during the period, more than 90% occurred in developing countries. Drought is costly. Economic losses due to drought have increased multifold in the past decades. The drought is devastating. An estimated 55 million people globally are directly affected by droughts every year, making it the most serious hazard to livestock and crops in nearly every part of the world. Livestock and crops means poor people, food security, and livelihoods and so on. Drought affects women and girls disproportionately. So greater burden and suffering are inflicted on women and girls. Drought is underestimated. Droughts have deep, widespread, and underestimated impacts on societies, ecosystems, and economies, with only a portion of the actual losses accounted for. Attribution of deaths and losses and so on always tricky, and of course the government may try to downplay it, or regional government may overplay it to get aid from the center or international aid. So it's very complicated socio-political, socio-economic issue. Drought preparedness policies make a difference. Land restoration is cost effective. We'll read a bit more about what are the ways to do these, and there are examples from Niger here, and there are in the report there are also examples of success stories that I will read. I think one of the examples. Education instills readiness. Even in India we have found that educating women and girls increases their ability to respond to early warnings and reduces their vulnerability to hydroclimatic hazards. Media matters, even though sometimes they tend to highlight the worst of the impacts and worst of the future based on projections. For example, here we have a statement about the future 2040. Where did I see it? Here. Yeah, let me leave it. All the projections we have talked about. Turning the tide, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees C, along with regenerative land and improved water management practices, is expected to substantially reduce the probability of extreme drought events. Many of these are no regret decisions. There is no negative outcome coming out of those, and they ameliorate risk, mitigate impacts, and so on. New horizons, a paradigm shift from reactive to crisis-based approaches to proactive and risk-based drought management approaches are indispensable. So instead of always reacting to things after they happen, can you be prepared? Can you have a roadmap of the risks you are facing and how to be ready and resilient? So these are the countries affected by drought in 2020 to 2022. Central Western US, this is a climatologically dry place, but there's a lot of water exploitation happening here, agriculture, urbanization, and so on. And the west coast of South America and Brazil, we already saw in the flash drought transition that Amazon is experiencing a lot of it. Lots of Europe and MENA, of course, Middle East and North Africa, even Sahel and rest of Africa here, and Central Western Asia, India and the neighborhood, China, and of course the Southeast Asian countries and Australia. What are the droughts around the world during 1900 to 2022? We'll just read off some number. More than 10 million people lost their lives due to major drought events. Severe drought affects Africa more than any other continent. In the past century, 45 major drought events occurred in Europe. In the US, crop failures and other economic losses due to drought have totaled several $100 billion over the last century. Over the past century, the highest total number of humans affected by drought were in Asia. Okay, so these are the historic droughts, current trends, and desertification hotspots. So the words are a little small, but you see that this is the US that we saw about before in just 2020 to 2022, but you can see that there have been many from 1934 to 1940, which was the Great Depression, and more recently 2014 to 2019, and you have here again 1921, but also as recent as 1991 to 1905. So you can see the hotspots there. Here again, going back to 1920s, 1910 to 1920, but more recently 2018 to 2022. And South American droughts for 2020-2021 Brazil drought, and of course older ones like 1968 to 1977. So here we have 1900, 1942 and 1965 Indian droughts, 1920, 2010 to 2020, 2011, 2017 in China, and 2015 and to 18 in South Central Asian drought, 2011 Tuvalu drought, and of course in Australia you have 1901, 79 to 83, 2001 to 2002, I think. You can look it up, sorry, it's a bit small. I'll stop soon, maybe getting long here. But drought impacts on human society. Over 1.4 billion people were affected by drought over 2000 to 2019. The effect of severe droughts was estimated to have reduced India's gross domestic product by 2 to 5%. As a result of the Australian millennium drought, total agricultural productivity fell by 18% in the period of 2002 to 2010. So this is here 2001 to 2009. The burden of water collection, the drudgery, especially in dry lands, falls disproportionately on women and girls. During the past 2 years, 2020-2021, when the data was reported here, widespread precipitation deficits were recorded across South American continent, and drought is a major driver of crop yield volatility, and in particular causes low yields that can lead to substantial financial losses, civil unrest, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you have to always look up what the definition of vulnerability is, but there are some indices used to compute this metric. So you are going here from more vulnerable to natural desert. So you have Sahara, Middle East, and so on here and here. But you can see that the global drought vulnerability index in 2022 shows much more vulnerability in large parts of Africa and large parts of India, and here in Asia, China, and the Philippines, and Central Asia, Indonesia, and so on, as well as the natural deserts that are spread. So you can see the edges here are always more vulnerable in terms of just the high variability in rainfall and rainfall deficits and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's come back and try to conclude this. As you can see, I'm reading only brief points, not reading all the text, but the report is online, very useful. You definitely want to go back and read if you are interested in details, and of course, as usual, it has some good references and case studies as well. Okay, so see you in the next podcast on droughts by numbers, getting ready and building resilience. Okay.